April 1967. The rain over northern Vietnam fell thick and warm, clinging to metal, jungle leaves, and broken concrete alike. At Gia Lam Airfield outside Hanoi, a shape rested beneath camouflage netting that did not belong to this war, or any war the men standing around it truly understood. It was an American aircraft, not wreckage, not scattered debris hauled from a jungle clearing, but whole, scarred, patched, leaking hydraulic fluid in slow red drops, yet unmistakably intact. Its swept wings bore faded U.S. Air Force insignia hastily painted over with rough green stars. The nose cone was cracked, the canopy spiderwebbed, but the fuselage remained proud, heavy, alien. An F-105 Thunderchief. The North Vietnamese officers moved carefully around it, voices low. This was not propaganda. This was not a trophy for parade. This was something else, something dangerous in a different way. The aircraft had come down 3 days earlier after taking ground fire during a strike on a rail junction near Yen Bai. The pilot had ejected. The plane miraculously had not disintegrated. And now it sat here, breathing faintly through leaking systems, like a wounded animal from another world. By nightfall, the decision had already been made. This machine would not stay in Vietnam. The transfer was handled quietly, without ceremony. Soviet advisors had been embedded in North Vietnam for years. Air defense specialists, radar operators, missile crews. But when word spread that a nearly intact American supersonic strike aircraft had been captured, a different kind of message went out. Not through Hanoi, through Moscow. Within 2 weeks, the Thunderchief was disassembled just enough to move, loaded onto rail cars under tarps, shipped north under the guise of industrial equipment. Chinese territory was avoided entirely. The route was long, slow, deliberate. Every bolt was cataloged, every panel photographed. By early June, the aircraft crossed into Soviet territory. Officially, it did not exist. Zhukovsky Airfield outside Moscow was no stranger to secrets, but even there, the hangar that received the American jet was sealed tighter than most. Armed guards, restricted lists rewritten daily, engineers brought in under false project names, and standing beneath the harsh white lights, looking up at the massive American airframe, was Colonel Alexei Mikhailovich Orlov, test pilot, hero of socialist labor, veteran of the MiG-19 and early MiG-21 trials. He had flown nearly every Soviet tactical aircraft worth remembering. He knew their flaws intimately. He knew how they screamed when pushed too far, how they vibrated when theory met reality. But this was something else. "It's enormous," one engineer muttered almost involuntarily. Orlov didn't answer. He walked slowly around the Thunderchief, boots echoing on concrete. The aircraft looked less like a fighter and more like a missile with a cockpit attached. Thick fuselage, heavy landing gear. The intake alone was wider than a MiG's nose. "Designed to go fast," Orlov finally said. "Designed to go far." He stopped beneath the wing, ran a gloved hand across the metal skin. It was smooth, almost elegant. Panels fit flush, rivets recessed. This was not the rough utilitarian skin of Soviet aircraft. This was craftsmanship. Expensive, deliberate. A technician held up a clipboard. "Colonel, the Americans built redundancy into everything. Triple backups, parallel systems, even the wiring routes are duplicated." Orlov smiled thinly. "Yes," he said, "and every kilogram of that costs fuel, costs maintenance, costs time." Inside the cockpit, the contrast was sharper. The seat was wide, padded, the canopy visibility excellent. Instruments were dense, layered, packed with information. Radar displays, bombing computers, navigation aids, an entire flying operations center wrapped around a single pilot. Orlov settled into the seat with difficulty. The Thunderchief had been built for large men. He reached forward, fingers brushing switches labeled in English. "This aircraft," he said quietly, "assumes the pilot will survive long enough to need all of this." No one laughed. The briefing room was silent as Orlov addressed the gathered engineers, designers, and intelligence officers. "The Americans did not build this plane to fight for 5 minutes," he began. "They built it to penetrate deep, to carry heavy weapons, to operate independently of ground control." A slide illuminated behind him. Range figures, payload charts, maintenance diagrams. "It is not a knife," Orlov continued. "It is a hammer." Someone at the back spoke. "Can a dog fight?" Orlov paused. "It can," he said, "but it does not want to." That was the difference, he explained. Soviet fighters were built around short engagements: intercept, strike, disengage. American aircraft like the F-105 were built to endure, to fly long missions through hostile space, relying on onboard systems rather than centralized control. "This is not an aircraft built for scarcity," Orlov said. "It is built for abundance. Fuel, spare parts, trained crews, clean runways." The room understood the implication immediately. The first engine test shook the hangar. The Pratt & Whitney J-75 roared to life with a deep, controlled violence, unlike Soviet engines. It did not scream. It pressed against the air. Gauges climbed smoothly. Vibrations were minimal. One engineer leaned toward Orlov. "It sounds confident." Orlov nodded. "Yes," he said, "and confidence is expensive." The order to fly it came from higher than expected, not the Air Force. The Politburo. 3 weeks later, under a pale summer sky, the American jet rolled down a Soviet runway. Orlov advanced the throttle carefully. The Thunderchief accelerated with a sense of mass, not urgency. It gathered speed like a freight train, unstoppable once committed. The nose lifted smoothly. The aircraft climbed, stable, obedient. "This is not a fighter," Orlov said into the recorder strapped to his chest. "This is a promise. It promises the pilot that if he follows procedure, the machine will carry him through almost anything." At altitude, the aircraft felt heavy but precise. Controls were damped, forgiving. The Americans had engineered fear out of the machine, or at least tried to. But when Orlov simulated combat conditions, the truth emerged. The Thunderchief did not like improvisation. It liked plans. And plans, Orlov knew, did not survive first contact. As he turned back toward the airfield, descending slowly, one thought settled firmly in his mind. This aircraft is brilliant, and in the wrong war, brilliance can be a weakness. The real test began at low altitude. High above the clouds, the Thunderchief behaved exactly as its designers intended. Stable, predictable, almost reassuring. But war in Vietnam did not live at altitude. It lived below the radar horizon, in valleys choked with smoke, in air thick with flak and confusion. Orlov knew this. So he took the American aircraft down. At 5,000 feet, the jet began to feel different. Still powerful, still obedient, but now burdened. Every maneuver carried momentum that had to be managed. Every correction lagged behind intention. The aircraft wanted smooth arcs, wide turns, patience. Orlov flew it like he flew Soviet aircraft at first. Aggressive inputs, rapid changes in attitude. The Thunderchief resisted, not violently, not dangerously, but firmly, like a machine reminding its pilot, "This is not how I was meant to be used." He recorded his impressions carefully. "The control philosophy assumes foresight," he said into the tape. "It assumes time." He pulled into a climbing turn, simulating an evasive maneuver after weapons release. The aircraft responded, but sluggishly compared to a MiG-21. Its mass worked against it. "In a planned strike," he continued, "this is acceptable. In chaos, it is not." Back on the ground, engineers pored over telemetry. "The Americans traded reaction speed for stability," one noted. Orlov corrected him. "They traded reaction speed for confidence." Over the following weeks, the Thunderchief flew repeatedly. Fuel consumption was measured. Maintenance times logged. Components disassembled and reassembled under observation. The numbers impressed everyone. The aircraft could carry more ordnance than 2 MiG sorties combined. Its range dwarfed Soviet tactical fighters. Its bombing accuracy, even with partially disabled systems, was remarkable. But the maintenance crews struggled. Every repair required specialized tools. Access panels were precise but numerous. Wiring looms were complex. Components were tightly integrated. One mechanic finally said what many were thinking. "This aircraft assumes the war stops for maintenance?" Orlov added that sentence to his notes. The most revealing exercise came during simulated interception. A pair of MiG-21s, flown by experienced pilots, were tasked with engaging the Thunderchief under controlled conditions. The scenario mirrored Vietnam, the American aircraft entering hostile airspace alone, no escort. At altitude, the Thunderchief survived easily. Radar warning systems gave early notice. Speed and dive allowed escape. But once forced low, below 10,000 feet, the situation changed rapidly. The MiGs did not stay. They appeared, struck, disappeared. The Thunderchief could not turn fast enough to keep them in sight. Its radar struggled at close range. Its weight worked against it. Orlov watched the replay footage in silence. Then he spoke. "The Americans built a sword," he said, "and gave it to a man walking through a forest of knives." The report he began drafting was careful, but relentless. He praised American engineering openly. The Thunderchief, he wrote, was a triumph of industrial capability. It represented a nation capable of projecting power across oceans, sustaining complex systems far from home. But doctrine was destiny. "The aircraft reflects the assumptions of its creators," Orlov wrote. "It assumes air superiority, predictable logistics, and uninterrupted operational tempo." He contrasted it with Soviet philosophy. "Our aircraft assume disruption," he continued. "They assume damaged runways, exhausted crews, incomplete information. They assume the pilot may only live for the next engagement." Neither approach was wrong, but they were not interchangeable. One evening, Orlov sat alone in the hangar long after the others had left. The Thunderchief loomed above him, silent now, stripped of weapons, its American serial numbers carefully obscured. He imagined the pilot who had flown it over Vietnam, well-trained, confident in his systems, trusting his instruments. Orlov respected that pilot, but he also understood why North Vietnamese MiGs had been effective. They did not fight the aircraft. They fought the assumptions behind it. When the final report reached Moscow, it unsettled more than it impressed. There were no revelations of American weakness to exploit easily, no miraculous flaws, no shortcuts. Instead, there was a mirror. One senior official summarized it bluntly. "They are not technologically reckless," he said. "They are strategically optimistic." Orlov's conclusion was circulated quietly among design bureaus. Future Soviet aircraft, he argued, must never assume favorable conditions. They must function when doctrine collapses. Because, he wrote, the enemy will always try to collapse doctrine before destroying machines. Months later, as the Thunderchief was dismantled and returned to storage, Orlov flew one final sortie in a MiG-21. It felt small, violent, honest. As he landed, he realized something that unsettled him deeply. If roles were reversed, if Soviet pilots were asked to fly the Thunderchief in Vietnam, they would struggle. And if American pilots were forced to fight exclusively in MiGs, many would not survive. The machines were not superior or inferior. They were truthful reflections of the wars their nations believed they were fighting. And Vietnam, Orlov knew, was not the war America believed it was in. The Thunderchief never appeared in public. The American aircraft did not disappear immediately. For nearly a year after the conclusion of its flight tests, the F-105 Thunderchief remained at Zhukovsky, rolled out periodically for subsystem evaluations, structural stress analysis, and ground simulations. By then, it was no longer viewed as an exotic prize. It had become something more unsettling, a reference point. Engineers compared it not only to Soviet fighters, but to Soviet thinking. Every inspection reinforced the same impression. The aircraft was built with extraordinary care. Wiring bundles were labeled meticulously. Hydraulic lines were routed for accessibility. Components failed gracefully rather than catastrophically. Even battle damage tolerance exceeded expectations. This was not arrogance. It was confidence institutionalized. Colonel Orlov continued to supervise portions of the program, though his role gradually shifted from pilot to interpreter. Younger engineers asked him not how the aircraft flew, but what it assumed. "What kind of war does this machine expect?" one asked. Orlov answered without hesitation. "A short one," he said, "or a decisive one." In Vietnam, the war proved to be neither. Reports filtered in through intelligence channels. Thunderchief losses mounted steadily, not catastrophically, but persistently. Surface-to-air missiles, flak, MiGs operating from ambush. The aircraft's speed and payload could not compensate for predictability. Orlov noticed something striking in the American reports. Pilots trusted their machines completely, and when that trust was broken, when systems failed, when plans unraveled, the psychological shock was severe. Soviet doctrine, by contrast, assumed failure as a starting condition. Our pilots expect the radio to fail, Orlov wrote in a later note. They expect the runway to be damaged. They expect orders to arrive late or not at all. He paused before adding, the American pilot expects the system to work. Neither expectation was morally superior, but one was more forgiving. By 1970, the decision was made to terminate active study of the Thunderchief. Its lessons had been extracted. Its presence was no longer necessary. The aircraft was disassembled one final time. Major components were stored separately. Avionics sealed, documentation archived. The airframe itself was moved into long-term storage under a designation known only to Logistics Command. It would never fly again. Orlov's final formal assessment was distributed to senior officers and design bureaus under strict classification. It contained no dramatic warnings, no ideological language, just conclusions. American aircraft are designed to dominate environments that remain stable. Soviet aircraft are designed to function when environments collapse. American engineering minimizes pilot burden through automation. Soviet engineering minimizes system burden through simplification. The captured aircraft demonstrates excellence within its design assumptions. Outside those assumptions, its advantages diminish rapidly. The last line was underlined twice in Orlov's handwriting. Years passed. The war dragged on, then ended. The Thunderchief became a footnote even in American history, overshadowed by newer aircraft, newer conflicts. But among a small group of Soviet engineers and pilots, it remained quietly influential. Design reviews referenced it indirectly. Remember the American solution, someone would say, meaning be careful what you assume. In the late 1980s, shortly before his retirement, Orlov visited a training regiment flying newer Soviet fighters. The cockpits were more complex now, displays brighter, systems smarter. Progress was undeniable, yet something troubled him. During a briefing, a young pilot complained about a minor avionics malfunction. I couldn't complete the profile, the pilot said. The system wouldn't allow it. Orlov interrupted. Did the aircraft still fly? Yes, of course. Did it still have fuel? Yes. Did it still have weapons? Yes. Then the profile was wrong, Orlov said. The room fell silent. After retirement, Orlov rarely spoke publicly. When he did, it was never about victories or enemies. It was about machines and the people who trusted them. In a private conversation recorded years later, he finally spoke directly about the American aircraft. It was beautiful, he said. Heavy, confident, powerful. It felt like flying in agreement. You follow the rules and it will protect you. He smiled faintly. But war breaks agreements. Near the end of his life, Orlov revisited his old flight logs. Among them was the Thunderchief sortie, its pages yellowed, notes precise. At the bottom of the final page, he had written a single sentence, long before he understood how true it would become. This aircraft does not forgive chaos. He closed the logbook and placed it back on the shelf. Outside, a jet engine roared to life somewhere beyond the trees. Different generation, different country, same ambition. Orlov understood now what the captured aircraft had truly revealed. Not weakness, not superiority, but the cost of believing that war would behave as planned.